So these losers-wise, and this team was a big loser right away, right after the show on Monday. This news went down. We didn't really get to too much talk about it because there's so much going on with Tom Brady on Thursday, but at least I want to kind of get into it here. And that's the Texans, right? There was a rumor released that DeAndre Hopkins could be in the trade block this time last week. So right when we got the show back off and running, there was just a report that maybe the Texans could be thinking about shopping DeAndre Hopkins. And he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. But you look at least the Texans and the position they're in. They spent a lot of money, and their cap space isn't great because a lot of these guys that they've signed or they've because they haven't really drafted well, have been forced to overpay players. And now, at least you look in the future, they traded 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick for left tackle Larry Tunsil. So now you're going to have to pay him next year. You're going to have to pay Deshaun Watson next year. So the Texans were in a tough spot because they didn't have a lot of cap room and they didn't have a lot of draft picks, so they traded away a ton of first-round picks for different players, including, again, Larry Tunsil was a big one. And at least, so the idea, while it was still shocking, at least, all right, if you get some sort of value back, you get maybe a first or even 2 first-round picks back, at least you can kind of, recoup there and at least try to rebuild quickly. Instead, they traded away DeAndre Hopkins, an all-pro wide receiver, one of the best wide receivers in the game. I think everyone would agree the best hands, just straight-up hands in all of the NFL, for an injury-prone running back in David Johnson and a second-round pick. And the reason why that's so mind-numbing is because now, at least when you have a franchise quarterback in Deshaun Watson, who's still young, who's still on a rookie deal, we've seen in the NFL, the time to win is when you have a franchise quarterback still on a rookie deal. That is time to win. You saw the Chiefs get to do it with Patrick Mahomes while he was still getting paid a little bit of money. Because now, you, at least once you have the quarterback set, you can spend money elsewhere for those 2-3 years or so, where you can really afford to spend money elsewhere on other positions of need and build your team as solid as possible. Once these quarterbacks get paid, the number is only going up. I understand that the salary cap is increasing, but the quarterback rate for money is going sky high, and there's really right now no ceiling or no bubble that's going to burst anytime soon. I mean, Dak Prescott is looking at the fact that he wants $40 million a year. It's going to happen. And if he's worth $40 million, God knows what Deshaun Watson, and especially Patrick Mahomes, is worth. So once you start paying a large chunk of the salary cap towards your quarterback, it's harder to give money to other positions of need, and it's harder, at least, to build your team and make it as good as possible because you just can't have the money to pay everyone. So that's why the draft picks are so important. To not even get a first-round pick back for a receiver, and then you see Stephon Diggs a few days later traded away from the Vikings to the Bills. The Bills gave 4 picks, including a first-round pick. I think there's no argument that DeAndre Hopkins is a better wide receiver than Stephon Diggs. So Bill O'Brien trades away a wide receiver for pennies on the dollar, not to mention you get back a running back who the Cardinals were desperate to get rid of. They gave him a 3-year extension in David Johnson back in 2018. This is the second year of that 3-year deal. They basically were going to give him away. And in doing that, they basically did. They gave David Johnson away to the Texans, and in return, they received DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know what Bill O'Brien was thinking. Him as a head coach has not exactly worked out to the best of the Texans' hopes and capabilities, and now at least his GM skills have been extremely questionable at best. You could say very, very poor. And what really adds salt to the wound, which really makes this trade sting even more, is that if you look a few days later, the Rams cut Todd Gurley, meaning if the Texans just waited even a few days, or even Bill O'Brien was shopping around DeAndre Hopkins to a few other teams trying to line up his offers, Todd Gurley was thrown on the market, and he could have signed for cheap. So instead, Gurley was a very similar and I think a lot better skill set than David Johnson, but similar type of players where they can get the ball to the backfield, good running back, injury prone, but they're very dynamic if they're healthy and once they get on the field. Could have had him. So you could have kept DeAndre Hopkins. You could have signed Todd Gurley to a cheap deal, and instead you take on a decently heavy contract in David Johnson. You trade away your best wide receiver, and now your top wide receiver for the Texans going into a year where it's a must-win year. Like the window is quickly closing for the Texans. Because now, like I said, you're going to have to pay Larry Tunsil, the left tackle, a large sum of money, basically whatever he wants, because of what you gave up to get him. You have to pay Deshaun Watson an exorbitant amount of money because he's a dynamic franchise quarterback and deserves all that money. So now you're going to have Deshaun Watson thrown to Will Fuller, who can't stay on the field and really can only run one route, which is a deep ball. Kenny Stills and Randall Cobb. Not to mention, like I said, you have no first-round pick. You have 2 second-rounders this year, but you have no first-round pick this year or next year. The Texans were desperate at least to get some sort of value back for Hopkins. They did not. And to me, that's why they're the biggest loser by far of this first week of free agency. Another loser, I think, and that's the Titans. And because of the move they made even before free agency started, and that was deciding to take Ryan Tannehill and choose Ryan Tannehill to give him an extension over the possibility of signing Tom Brady. Even before free agency started, Ryan Tannehill signed a 4-year, $118 million extension to be the franchise quarterback for the Titans, again, these next 4 years. And why I'm questioning that, why I think that they are a loser in this case, is because, one, you could have Tom Brady. I understand the window for Tom Brady is a lot smaller than it would be for Ryan Tannehill, just by pure age standpoint, right? Tom Brady will be 43. I would say at best case scenario, you have 2 years. You have 2 legitimate years on Tom Brady left where you could try to win a title, try to win a Super Bowl, and you'll have Tom Brady still playing, I think, 75, 80% of what he is before he really starts to decline. I think that, he showed at least no true signs of decline just yet. I don't think that will be a massive drop-off this year. So I think you have legitimately 2 years, let's say, for a window. You got to the AFC title game this year. Part of the reason why you didn't advance any further, obviously, is, one, you ran into the bus that was the Chiefs. No one's going to beat the Chiefs this year. But also part of that is because Ryan Tannehill wasn't the reason why they won these games in the playoffs. I understand he did, once he filled in for Marcus Mariota, did a lot of good and really was a big reason why the Titans even made the playoffs in the first place, because they got off to a rough start. A very rough start, 2-4 with Mariota as quarterback through the first 6 weeks. Tannehill comes in. Obviously, it's a big turnaround. The offense is explosive. They start putting up points per game in chunks. And really, the 1-2 punch of Tannehill and Henry both were clicking at the same time. But what I'm nervous about is that you look at the 2 playoff wins that the Titans won. They went on the road and beat Tom Brady and that Patriots team in Foxborough, a feat that we know is impossible to do. And then they go beat the number 1 seed in the Ravens on the road with the MVP in Lamar Jackson getting, for the most part, contained. But what I'm concerned about is you look at Ryan Tannehill's performance in those games. He attempted, in the 2 games combined, 29 passes. So in 2 wins, he even just tried to throw the ball 29 times for 160 yards. They won that game because of offensive line play, because of Derrick Henry running the ball and chewing up clock, and the defense was physical and made just enough plays to keep, again, Tom Brady at bay and Lamar Jackson at bay. So at least if I was the Titans, I would have looked at last year. To me, at least, I don't think Ryan Tannehill is the guy going forward. Like he's too inconsistent. He does get banged up. He's not, doesn't truly stay healthy. And are we really reading too much into those 7 games that he helped lead the Titans to the playoffs? And maybe is the 29 pass attempts and the 2 playoff wins more of who Ryan Tannehill is? Because if this was the same guy that was dynamic, that was throwing deep balls, that was making some plays with his legs and his arm to help the Titans get to the playoffs, how come all of a sudden once they got there, the Titans basically did everything they possibly could to not put the ball in Tannehill's hands and force him to either win or lose the game? It's essentially what the Jaguars did with Blake Bortles, right? Basically the same scenario. The Jaguars had a great defense. They had a great running game and a great offensive line with Leonard Fournette. They had Blake Bortles as a quarterback. They basically said, Blake, please don't lose us the game. We're going to throw the ball a little bit. We're going to ask you to do some sort of plays, but please, we're not going to put a large burden on your shoulders, and just whatever you do, don't be the reason why they lose. And they beat the Bills. They beat the Steelers. And part of that was they had a great running game and a great defense. Similar to what the Titans have, and now you see it's a little bit different because I think personality's kind of got in the way, but they give Blake Bortles an extension in Jacksonville. 2 years later, he's cut. I wonder if not that could happen the same with Ryan Tannehill, but I just don't think that the Titans' ceiling is raised at all with Ryan Tannehill staying in there for 4 years over the 2 years you could have with Tom Brady. And the second reason why I think they're a loser is because, kind of talking about what I just did, their team and their identity is built on running the ball and physicality. Well, they lost a big offensive lineman in the run game in Jack Conklin. He goes to Cleveland, which is why I think that they are a big winner. But when you rely so much on the run, when your identity is built so much on basically time of possession, chewing up clock, and punching the other team in the mouth, you need guys like Jack Conklin there to pave the way for Derrick Henry and, again, set the tone on the offensive line. You really can't afford to lose players that important on your offensive line when you rely so heavily on the run game, that offensive line, to create some holes. So at least to me, that's why I think the Titans were a big loser, because they signed Ryan Tannehill. I don't think he's the answer, especially in the AFC. When you look at the AFC kind of landscape, it's all about young franchise, up-and-coming dynamic quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, Deshaun Watson in Houston, I mean, I'm not a big Josh Allen fan per se, but you had him in Buffalo make the playoffs. You had Lamar Jackson obviously coming off an MVP kind of season. Those are the kind of the guys that you're going to have to face year in and year out now if you're Tennessee. Those are the guys you have to beat year in and year out if you want to go back to this. If you want to go to the Super Bowl. I don't think Ryan Tannehill is the quarterback that you need in order to beat them. I would have went with Tom Brady and then reassessed in the draft either this year or next year and kind of find his replacement. So I think that's why the Titans are a big loser. And number 3, the Rams. Because, I mean, releasing Todd Gurley on Thursday was necessary per se because the value that they paid and the value they were getting on the field does not match up. I mean, think about it. Just 20 months ago, the Rams gave Todd Gurley a 4-year, $60 million deal, which at the time was the richest for a running back with guarantees, and he had $45 million guaranteed. Great career, most rushing touchdowns in franchise history, 58. Even just in that Super Bowl year when he was dynamic, right? Rushed for 1,200 yards, 21 touchdowns, led the league in touchdowns. And as we know, gets hurt. His knee's broken up. The arthritis is what it ends up being with Todd Gurley in the knee. He doesn't play much down the stretch. Plays one playoff game against Cowboys. Has a great game. Is a non-factor in the Saints game. Basically a non-factor in the Super Bowl. And then he follows that up this year with just a career low in terms of yards rushed with 857. So the Rams are similar to the Texans, are in a tough spot because they have not much cap flexibility, and they have already some guys in Brandin Cooks and Jared Goff especially and Aaron Donald locked up some big-time long-term deals. So there's not much flexibility there. And to release Todd Gurley is really, really tough on the cap. And again, it shows, unfortunately, why you can't give running backs big money. You kind of have to take it year by year with them, and you have to play hardball because, as you see, when you try to reward running backs, unfortunately, just the way the game is, the physicality, it's too risky to do it. So not to mention you released Todd Gurley, which is, was one of the figureheads, was one of the faces of the franchise, especially now as they move to a new stadium. He's gone. You also lose some big defensive players, Michael Brockers, Corey Littleton, Dante Fowler Jr. So now you lost, and they cut Clay Matthews. So those are 4 guys that were pretty key pieces to the Rams on their defensive side. And like I said, while they just have a little bit of wiggle room with $19 million in cap space, it's tough because this is a team that, went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, missed the playoffs last year, still trying and still thinks of themselves as a playoff caliber team. They're an extremely tough division in the NFC West with the 49ers and the Seahawks. Now you have the Cardinals that are up and coming that just got even better. They were one of those tough, spunky teams last year that, despite having a losing record, was a tough out. They played tough, and they weren't a walkover. So now you have you're in the toughest division in the NFL, a tough conference, especially now with Tom Brady going to the Buccaneers. The Rams are in trouble because they really can't afford to add many players. They're losing players, especially on the defensive side. And it's especially with Jared Goff, if you don't trust him, if you're Sean McVay, may have made a mistake in paying him all that money. Jared Goff's not the kind of guy that if you don't give him a lot of pieces around him can still elevate a team and still carry them on his back. He can't. So interesting to see. I think the Rams are big losers.